Tonight, a very personal story from one of our own. Shannon Hegy gave birth to her son Carter back in July, but parenthood has been anything but ordinary. At just 2 months old, her son was admitted to the hospital where he spent a total of 10 weeks battling a potentially deadly infection.
And Mike, I documented just about every moment that we were in the hospital because I knew this was a story I was going to have to tell. This is Carter's story.
Okay, reporting from Women in Infants Hospital. Water broke at 2 o'clock. You finally decided to come on your own, little man.
When Carter was born, it was surreal. It was the happiest day of our lives. I remember actually thinking during those first 2 months, I'm so happy and everything's so perfect right now that I'm afraid something's gonna go wrong. And of course, that's what ended up happening. I said to Mac, something's wrong. Carter's burning up. And he was moaning more, took his temperature, and it was 102. And he kept getting worse and worse on the way to the hospital. He could barely open his eyes. They told me they had to do a spinal tap. And Carter's 2 months old, and they were about to stick a needle in his spine. The doctor came in and told me that it was meningitis. Well, when you Google bacterial meningitis, the first thing you find is mortality rates.
Hello.
And that infants die from this. My kid's life just flashed before my eyes, and I started picturing, actually, you know what I pictured? I have a necklace that has Carter's name on it, and I started picturing having to tell people when they asked who's that was my son. Not that is my son, that was my son. Because that's what was going through my mind, is he has something that's gonna kill him.
It happens less than 1 per 1,000 live births. Bacteria that you naturally have in your body can leak across those structures, get into your bloodstream, and then seed your spinal fluid and your brain.
Do you know what the doctor said this morning? That you are 1 in a million. That's the chances of getting what you got.
Why was my kid sick? How were we the family that got dealt this blow?
You had us worried today. Are you feeling better now?
We got out of the ICU within, I think, 2 to 3 days. We were up in our room. Carter seemed to be doing much better.
The doctors all say you look great. They all say you're a charmer and that mommy and daddy are in trouble.
That first day we saw him and he was looking at us and smiling and actually did really well. And then to have a seizure 9 days in was unexpected.
His mouth started twitching and then his eyes started twitching. So I called the nurse, I screamed.
So his brain was quite irritated from the E. coli itself and the response of the body to that infection. So he ultimately developed essentially pus around his brain.
Do you know why you're swaddled right now, except for your feet? Because if we don't swaddle you, you pull off all of your wires. You're such a tough kid, you know that?
We turned the hospital room into our home, and we made it through another 2 weeks, and we found out at 4 weeks that they were going to let us go home.
It is October 16th. We've been in the hospital for 30 days straight. And guess what we just found out? We're going home! We love you so much. We can't wait to take you home.
And that was, aside from Carter being born, the other happiest day of our lives. I remember we cried after Carter's MRI. They came into the room and told us, you guys can go home.
Carter, say bye to all your friends! Just wave! So cute. Say bye-bye to everybody. Look at no wires. Yay! I'm free!
It's crazy looking back because you get back into normal life. And, you know, I think Matt and I have put that aside and tried to put it in the back of our minds. So watching it all again is surreal.
So Carter's tough and beautiful, as you could see. But, you know, 2 months old, you can't really tell your mom and dad what's wrong.
That was the hardest part. Well, one of the hardest parts. But yeah, that he, you know, we would know he was in pain, but you can't tell us. He can't. And the doctors described it as the worst headache of your life. So for, you know, such a little kid to be in so much pain, it was awful. I mean, think about giving, you know, a 2-month-old baby morphine.
Right.
That's what he was going through. Thankfully, the worst of it was 2 weeks long, and after that, he kind of pulled out, and as you saw, you know, was smiling and kicking, and the doctors and nurses just were amazed by how well he was doing.
Happy for Carter. I haven't seen him in a while, but I do get video updates almost daily on Shannon's phone. Look, and he's always laughing and he's kicking up a storm. So we're very happy for him.
All right, thanks guys. Unfortunately, little did we know in that moment that you saw at the end there that the meningitis would come back and we would end up reliving this nightmare. We have that part of Carter's story coming up new at 6.
Now, Carter's story. It's an emotional story we first told you about live at 5. Shannon's son Carter was admitted to the hospital when he was just 2 months old, diagnosed with bacterial meningitis, a serious, potentially deadly infection that affects the brain and spinal cord.
And as we told you at 5, after 4 weeks of antibiotic treatment, we were thrilled to find out that Carter was cured and could go home. Little did we know the infection would strike again.
And guess what we just found out? We're going home.
There was no doubt in our minds when they told us we could go home that this was over. Day 12, we're home. I try to put him down for a nap and he's screaming and I feel his forehead and it's hot. And I take his temperature and it's 101. And we got to the ER and they did the spinal tap and sure enough, it was back.
And we were really so happy for you guys to have you discharged not only from the intensive care unit but from the hospital. And to have him back it was really frustrating and sad and demoralizing. We were really devastated for you, very honestly.
Oh, I'm so happy to see you smiling again.
He got an extended course of therapy the first time, and so to hear that he came back, after dealing with the sinking feeling in my stomach, was to really investigate, whether there was a problem with his immune system or whether there was something anatomic or something wrong structurally that would have predisposed him to getting meningitis for a second time.
Someone's in a good mood. Yeah. Mwah.
He probably just had 1 or 2 bacteria in that area that was walled off, that the antibiotics just hadn't penetrated and his body fully hadn't eradicated.
Here she is. Welcome back. We missed you.
Guys.
I wasn't prepared to share with the viewers that he was sick. So I talked about how, it was great having my son and how great maternity leave was. Great, we've had a few bumps in the road. But it was really hard to hide that emotion on the desk.
Hi.
Both times around, the first 2 or 3 days were really rough. And when you have a baby that smiles constantly and is the happiest kid, to not see him smiling is heartbreaking. So we would wait for that moment. And when he did, it just lit up the room for being such a tiny, tiny baby and having wires all over his head and needles stuck in him all the time and having to be sedated for MRIs all the time. Despite all of it, he'd smile and he'd laugh and he'd babble. And I mean, the amount of nurses that would just come into our room because they wanted to see him. I used to joke that he was the most popular kid on the floor, but he's just the bravest, happiest little boy. And everybody always said to me, I don't know how you're being so brave. I don't know how you're doing it. But I don't know how he was doing it.
Let me see those feet.
When I look back at those videos, everybody thinks their child's incredible, but I really do. I think he's an amazing little boy. One thing that I've taken away from this and that I tell other parents is just trust your instincts. You can always overreact, but you can't go back in time and hope you did. It's so true. The doctors told us over and over again, you got him here fast, both times. And when we got them there and they confirmed the meningitis, they got him on antibiotics right away. So that was huge. And I can't say enough about the doctors and nurses at Hasbro. They become, when you're in the hospital for 10 weeks total, they become your family.
Your family.
Yeah, so we just can't say enough about how close we got with them.
We saw pictures of Matt, Shannon's husband. That'd be a difficult time for him, too.
Yeah, it really was. And we both handle it differently. So there would be times when I would break down and Matt would be there for me. And then there would be times that Matt would break down and I'd be there for him. And somehow we made it so that both of us wouldn't break down at the same time because we knew we had to be there for Carter, you can't. You have to be strong for him. If Carter could be strong, we could be strong, right?
I always hear giggling at your desk now, at your work desk, and that's Shannon FaceTiming
Yeah.
Carter, and he's constantly giggling and laughing and so happy he's doing well.
Every night, Matt puts Carter to sleep, obviously, because I work a night shift, so we FaceTime, and I get to see him every night. And I'm happy to report that we've been home for just under 2 months. Carter turns 7 months old on Saturday. I'm kind of having an anxiety attack about it. He has a lot of doctor follow-ups. We have early intervention coming to the house because there are side effects from having meningitis. It's something that affects the brain. So they're keeping a close eye on him, but all signs point to the fact that he's doing wonderful. He's hitting or even surpassing all his milestones, crawling all over the house. He's doing wonderful. So
And he's beautiful too.
Thank you so much. So we're thrilled. And you can find more about Carter's story, including a link to the CDC's website and a meningitis fact sheet at WPRI.com. And then tomorrow on Eyewitness News This Morning, Danielle North and I will discuss some of the many organizations, because there really are some amazing organizations that helped us through this incredibly difficult journey.